We've got a really big grave chapter to talk about. This is Tokyo Ghoul Chapter 74, Frost's Ace Review slash Analytics. This video is going to be edited into a number of parts because of how big there is of stuff to talk about. So before I forget, and I want to get this out of the way, and please don't bash me in the comments about it, and if you do have some legitimate reasoning why. My thing is, Kaneki Ken has Stockholm Syndrome. What Stockholm Syndrome is, if you don't know, it's almost as like a captive disorder. When you get captured or put into captivity, you tend to, have a liking or an emotional feeling or bond to your captor, like Kaneki has to Arima. Like he calls him a father, in which father is a positive thing in terms of family when it comes to a family unit. As he so desperately tries to take back what's left, his two legs is the only things he has left. His legs serve as options or like opportunities for him, because when he was a centipede, his options were unlimited and he just had, chances to frolic and to be himself or whatever crazy monstrosity he wanted to be. But as Arima symbolically cuts off both his legs, he is left with no solutions. So he frantically, like the insect he is, because the first panel of this chapter was Arima squishing the insect, he frantically tries to grab back both of his legs to get back the emotional and physical opportunities he has left to lash out on Arima and run away. Now, he does not get his legs. Arima stabs him as he tries to heal in one of his legs and takes it back to the floor. The red lily is another thing I'd like to bring up in terms of symbolism. All around them are red lilies, I think, but the red lilies have all died. See, the red lily counts as a poison. Now, this poison was a poison that Rize used on Kaneki in terms of mentally, and Kaneki maybe hoped on using it on Arima, but Arima is known as the Grim Reaper, or the Reaper as they call him. So he kills anything that lives in his path and harvests whatever, hence the Reaper. He harvests whatever's in his path and takes the good nutrients, so that's why there's dead black flowers all around them. I think they symbolize red lilies that have died, and this is another symbolic thing that Rize is dead for sure. There is going to be no Kaneki in Rize, where Rize possesses Kaneki, or where she has his mentality. Rize is ultimately forever gone. Rize was Kaneki's poison to other people in terms of her attitude and her personality. Now, what else to talk about? Arima ultimately being this Grim Reaper type of character. First, he's just called Reaper, but with a lot of digging, I have learned that Reaper is just a shorthand term for Grim Reaper. And Grim Reaper means to take the form of another in death. So I ultimately think he is the body of a Grim Reaper. Arima is pale-skinned, which is like a skeleton because the Grim Reaper is a skeleton. He has a large scythe, which would be his Kagune or his Quinke, which is his weapon he ultimately uses to take or reap death upon the people that he chooses. So in this chapter, you see a couple of people he has on his bounty, or like people he's killed before, and I feel like that's ultimately a reason why he was able to take down the owls, because he's the Grim Reaper. Not to get religious, but he is a godlike character. He's in one of the slides you see in the bubbles, it says, and I quote, mere mortals cannot understand him," which means he is like a godlike character, and anyone who isn't on his level, which is seemingly impossible because he is the only one to look up to as a moral figure, he's like a god, and he's moral authority. He doesn't mess up. He sacrifices, and he has pity for some. And that's another thing. He had pity for Kaneki as if he was like a son to him, and it was almost like he held back instead of killing him, and he said 645 times or the number of times I've held back or could have killed you. And that just shows the pity like a god could have to people worshiping him, like sins and stuff. And ultimately, I think Arima's been controlled his entire life. Now, if we look back to Tokyo Ghoul Jack, because I will be making some references to anime, he acted very emotionally in Tokyo Ghoul Jack, but when you see him reappear towards the end of Jack and what is the character we know as in Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Re, as long as Route A, he is seemingly emotionless. So this transformation he's gone through, I presumably think it's been mind manipulated into him by one of the higher ups above him. Okay, so what is next to talk about? Yes, he is ultimately a Grim Reaper, and the Grim Reaper that he is also an investigator. Investigators, they do inequalities, I think that's how it's pronounced. And inequalities ask questions. That's why in the chapter he asks a question like, what are you going to do now? Like, what options do you have that I've cut off your opportunities and legs and such? He harvests what is good from a crop, like controlling Kaneki. Ultimately, in the end of Route A, you see Kaneki carrying Hide's body, and we are told that Kaneki is now an investigator, and he has been mind warped, or his memories have been erased to the investigator's advantage so that they can use him to be a super investigator that he is now. But this ultimately backfires and leaves Arima in the case he's in right now. Instead of killing Kaneki as a ghoul, he took pity for him and he made him into an investigator. Okay, so there was a number of people who represented Arima and how he was. Arima's super strong. Arima is an emotional airhead, I'd like to say, because on one of the panels someone said that he was an airhead. I think he's an emotional airhead, not good or very savvy with emotions. He's seen as very dead, bland, dark, not really having much of a will or much of any motives, and that's why I think we can never understand Arima or get into his head and what makes him tick. And this is another direct quote from one of Arima's comrades. I've known him for a long time, but I'm sad to say I don't know much about him. He's very under the radar, and he's like a god figure. You can be next to him and you can work with him, but you ultimately don't know anything about him. I think the red lily flowers have heavy symbolism in terms of the death and the transformation of Ken Kaneki. I either think this will be Ken Kaneki's deathbed, he will die here, or he will transform into something even greater, like you see in one of the last panels, him transforming into what seems to be a manifestation of Ito and his Kagune, and it seems pretty epic, to be honest. Now, since we have more time than I was expecting, because this analysis I was expecting to run a little bit longer, I'll go to my next page of notes. Maybe this will not have to be edited, because maybe I didn't flesh out as much as I wanted to. Estimated basis on a weight. Okay, so Arima, I did some research on what the word Arima means, and in statistics, Arima is an estimated base on what weighed sums can have on current values to past values. So I think everything down to the T was calculated about Ken Kaneki and Heise on how he would react to certain situations, and given his past, how things would turn out. And I think that's why Arima ultimately has the upper hand on him. And Arima, like I said, defined before, it's a statistical law, I'd like to say, of how things acted before and how they will act in their current state as a reaction to what happened before. Like Kaneki says, human emotions and actions, they're like chemicals. Once you have one reaction, you can never go back to a physical state of being. In simpler terms, it's an algorithm or formula that can always be, brought back to a certain viewpoint and circumstances in terms of opportunity. So it can always be brought back. Kaneki, Ken, or Heise will react this way because of life experiences, and it is ultimately a formula that can never fail, and only Arima, because hence his name, has found a way to make this formula actually work. So I think that's heavy symbolism in there. He's a model to how all ghoul investigators should act, is another direct quote. So yeah, there's just a lot of heavy symbolism in terms of how people see him as moral excellence. He really is the one investigator we can all look up to. Again, like a god figure, the one person that we can all look up to for a moral excellence in a sense. I like to go into the butterfly effect, because in the first panel, the butterfly was showcased. Origins for the butterfly effect originate in the chaos theory, and if you don't know it, I'd advise you to do some research on it. It's the sensitive effect that one non-linear change, something that has no relation to one another, can result in different in larger circumstances states. That is paraphrased. Like, one thing can lead to something that has no linear type of connection, like how Kaneki's past can lead to his present actions, hence the name Arima. So, emotionally, you just want to have Arima as someone to have around. He represents the many emotions that Kaneki has, and ultimately, Arima can just... I can't even...